Good afternoon. We are back in session and we'll move to our last committee of the day, the Business Operations Committee, and I'll turn to Vice Chair Duncan.
Thank you, Chair Davis. Along with Todd Chastain, we lead the Business Operations Committee and have three actions on first reading today. First one is Op 1, the allotment policy, manual modifications for coronavirus relief fund responsibility. This is a very, very important new item in terms of providing greater flexibility for the use of the funds that are the shortest term funds that the district receives for various needs. The deadline on use of these funds is December 30th of this year. And so there has been a move made to allow greater flexibility in the use of these funds to ensure that the funds are used for coronavirus relief purposes and provide the greatest assistance to the district. So to report on this issue, we have Alexis Schaus to lead us through first of all, the flexibility that's being given and to lead us through the status of this allotment policy manual for it. Alexis?
Thank you, sir. This is Alexis Schaus, the Director of School Business, and good afternoon to you all. You have two attachments in your materials. As you can see on the screen, a letter dated November 20th from the North Carolina Pandemic Relief Office, which is under the Office of State Budget and Management, and the recommended revised allotment policies related to coronavirus relief funds. So in House Bill 1105, the General Assembly provided authorization to NCPRO, which is the Pandemic Relief Office, to reallocate unspent coronavirus relief funds, or CRF funds, as of November 20th. So as a reminder, these are the funds that are part of the CARES Act and the General Assembly provided to the public schools in approximately 15 different appropriations that were each for specific purposes. The total of approximately $315 million have been allocated to the public school units in accordance with the State Board of Education allotment policies. These are not the emergency relief funds or the governor's relief funds. So the authorization provided by NCPRO, as outlined in the memo, allows the State Board of Education to consider modifying the allotment policies to permit transfer of funds between the CRF programs. So by permitting this, the public school units would be able to move CRF funds into the allocations where they are most needed for that particular public school unit. For instance, if a public school unit has more of a need in the student devices program and less of a need for the funds in non-digital resources, the public school unit would be able to transfer the funds from the non-digital resource allocation into the student device allocation. So it would enable them to use the CRF funds consistent with the CARES Act and to cover the unexpected additional costs that they've incurred during this pandemic. The authorization, as outlined in that memo, does not change the use of the CRF funds, which is in legislation, and nor does it extend the December 30th deadline by which the funds must be used. The allotment policy manual for funds related to COVID-19, this was kind of we separated out those COVID policies into a kind of separate document, and that's what you have in your materials. And it contains all the policies related to the COVID funds. And there are the 14 policies for which NCPRO provided the flexibility have been modified to strike the language, funds shall not be transferred into or out of this allotment category. And each one of those policies had that language. And then it adds the language, funds may be transferred between any of the following coronavirus relief fund PRCs, and then lists the 14 PRCs or the policies that that the NCPRO identified in their memo. So the CRF programs that are not included in this flexibility are the Ellis grants that's the appropriation that goes to only to nonprofits, and the funds that were direct appropriations in law to specific public school units. You may recall there was about, I believe it was $1.6 million that was specifically identified for specific public school units, and that is not included in the NC Pro memo. So those are the changes related to the flexibility. There is a second change that modifies the language to the CRF programs that permit payroll expense in that program. I mean, some of them obviously, if it is the CRF program for computers, it does not permit payroll. But some of the CRF programs do permit payroll. For instance, the Jumpstart program and the school nutrition program. So the recommended change is to reflect the most recent U.S. Treasury guidance, and the change allows funds to be used to pay for a portion of payroll expenditures for personnel who are not substantially dedicated to mitigating or responding to COVID-19 public health emergency. Previously, it restricted the use for only personnel that was substantially dedicated. In other words, had at least 50% or more of their time dedicated, if this allows a pro rata share for those employees that are less than 50% dedicated. And then finally, the final change is to the formula for the mobile Wi-Fi for homes and communities. That is PRC 128 in your materials. And it is modified to allocate the unrequested funds on a per ADM basis. We had some residual funding that for this program that was not, the policy stated it is by application, and the applications were less than the total amount appropriated. With that, I am happy to answer any questions related to any of these changes.
Thank you, Ms. Schaus. This is very exciting news because it gives flexibility so that districts can use these funds where most needed. And we all know there's a great number of needs around the state in our CSU, so I think it's a very, very good development. Not much time to exercise it. We're going to be in a real sprint, but it's a good development. Are there any questions or thoughts about this? All right, not hearing any. We will have that to vote on today, and obviously quickly then work on getting information out to the district so that full advantage can be taken. BizOp 2 is Innovative Child Care and Remote Extended Support Competitive Grant Program, which is shortened to the iCares Competitive Grant. This was a part of the 10% reserve from the CARES Act, and it involves a total disbursement of $4,471,000 to districts, charter schools, and lab schools based on the competitive grant process. I'm here to provide a report on that for us with respect to the grant process is Dr. Tricia Townsend. Dr. Townsend.
Thank you, Vice Chair Duncan. Joining me today is Program Administrator Melissa Eddy. I'm grateful for her leadership with the development and administration of this grant competition. We can go ahead to the next slide. So as Vice Chair Duncan noted, these funds do come from the 10% reserve allocated from the CARES Act 10%. Districts, charters, and labs were eligible to make applications for this fund source in an effort to provide at-risk students with opportunities for remote learning and to be supervised during the day while their parents work. And I'll just go through these very quickly. We started our process in August. by sending out notification to potential applicants to let them know about the grant competition. We actually asked for them to submit a form so that we would know how many grant reviewers to have on hand. And so our process started back in August. After that, we brought it to state board to actually receive approval to move forward. And we then moved through a series of technical assistance webinars. So explaining what the grant program was about and then helping people understand how to navigate our grant system, CCIP. The process continued. October, they actually went through and applied, completed their application and submitted those in our CCIP system. And then following that, we've gone through a series of screenings, which actually gets us up to where we are today. And so we can continue going. And so now we have completed our level 2 reviews. So I guess I should backtrack a little bit. We actually hired an external consultant to actually administer the grant application process to ensure that it was fair and equitable. And so those blind reviews were done. And then after that was done, then those scores came to us for a level 2 review. And we are now in the phase where we are into level 3. We've already outlined our steps of what will come next. After approval from the board today, we will then reach out to the entities and begin the process of getting them set up and spending their money. Okay. We thought long and hard about the funding priorities. We really wanted to make sure that we made this process as fair and equitable as possible for the PSUs. And so we basically went through and established a set of priorities. And so those priorities included making sure that deferential treatment was given to PSUs that had students who are at risk for not performing at grade level, students who are at risk of dropping out, and then students who are at risk due to behavioral issues. Other considerations that we made sure were in place were making sure that we were able to give priority points for low performance in schools. So looking at their test scores. We also looked at the tier status. As we were looking at counties that were economically distressed, you could receive 2 points for being a tier 1 county. And then lastly, in set of priority points, we looked at our existing funding streams, so 21st Century and Ellis, and we started looking at the 8 regions to see where we really weren't getting a lot of traction. And so we were able to provide priority points for those regions as well. Okay. And then another one of the considerations that we were asked to really take into consideration was making sure that we offered a point for programs that were going to provide spaces for essential workers. And so if that was the case, if they were able to let us know that they were going to do that, they were eligible for a point there as well. And this was an area that we really wanted to beef up on. We did a quality review, but we also wanted to make sure that we had all the appropriate documentation. And so after going through and making reviews, if there were items that were missing, if we didn't have the appropriate signatures, we were poised to make point deductions to ensure that people would not be able to move forward in our competition if they had not done what they were supposed to. And believe it or not, there have been people that have uploaded blank documents. And so in those cases, those entities were appropriately moved from the competition. And so after going through the technical review, if necessary, points were deducted from the overall score. Okay, and I alluded to these 3 levels. And so in the first level, our partners at Serve Center at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, they completed the first review, a blind review. There were 3 scores per application, and then those scores were averaged. And then level 2, that was where we added those priority points that I discussed. And then lastly, now we're here for the level 3 review. And so for each of the applications, there was a grand total of 60 points that one could receive. And so all of the areas, at-risk students, making sure that there was a good description of what services would be provided, allowing us to understand what type of capacity the entity would have. And then another piece that we really have focused on is evaluation capacity, making sure that the entity has an opportunity to really be reflective and think about how they are going to internally measure the metrics associated with the grant. And then lastly, points for a budget narrative and making sure that it aligns back to what they said they were going to do in the other portions of the grant application. Okay. In terms of our funds, so we are working with $4.4 billion. And so we came up with a tiered strategy based on the number of students available. So anywhere from $200,000 to $500,000 based on the number of students being served. And so that was the number of students being served, and then also factoring in the number of at-risk students that would actually be served. And as stated before, this award will go through September 30th, 2021, and there will be a liquidation date of December 30th, 2021. And we are recommending at this time 13 recipients. And so I will not belabor the point and read all 13 recipients, but we have 13 recipients and we have a mix between LEAs and charter schools. And we do have representation across 7 of the 8 regions. The Northeast region is the only region that did not have an application selected for funding recommendation, but there is representation across 7 of the 8 regions. Okay. And in terms of this particular slide, it actually helps us to really understand how things actually were dispersed. So within the Western region, 2 of the applications actually were accepted for funding or being recommended for funding. 1 in the Northwest, 2 in the Southwest, 2 in the Piedmont Triad, 1 in the Sandhills, 3 in North Central, 2 in Southeast, and again, none in the Northeast. Okay, and we estimate that the impact, or based on the applications, that the impact will be we will impact over 4,000 students. And of those 4,000 being impacted, we estimate about 3,700 of those to be at risk. Okay. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to entertain any questions that the board might have at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Townsend. Are there questions or comments?
Yes, I have a question.
Please, Mr. Hall.
Thank you. Dr. Thompson, did you receive any applications from the Northeast or they were
Yes.
not complete?
Yes, sir. We received 5 applications from the Northeast.
Okay. Thank you.
What, I know the board has had concerns in the past on the grant process that some regions are underrepresented in receiving grants. If you look at a composite of number of grants, and again, the Northeast does not get one here. I want to compliment, however, Dr. Townsend and her staff. They worked very hard to put in points that would favor a region such as the Northeast, or give some additional points to their application. So, the two things we need to take from that are we still have work to do in the Northeast region in order to get grant money, because we know there's real needs there in that region. No question about it, as there are in all of our regions. So that's important. And the other thing is I think we need to continue to look at disbursement of funding in a grant process in terms of how we can further refine that. And that's more of a board policy ongoing thought process we likely need to consider, because I know we all care very much about each and every region. States, certainly Northeast, is very much part of that. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for those comments.
Yeah. Additional questions or comments?
Vice Chair Duncan, if I could make one more statement.
Please, Dr. Town.
I was going to say, so after our conversation, after we had our BizOp committee meeting, our staff, we actually met again and we met with our partners at the Serve Center. And so we began discussing I guess something we'd like to get in place is a series of technical assistance sessions to actually improve grant writing. I guess in this process, we see it's not enough to give the points. I think it's looking at what the underlying problems are and trying to fix them. And so helping them be able to clearly articulate their needs and then aligning that need to an actual program that they might implement. And so we know this is an area in which it's a problem. And so what you will see coming from our division is really an attempt to try to make a preemptive strike to improve the grant writing process so that we can get that much needed money out to some of those areas.
That's genuinely a splendid idea to provide, support to districts across the board to make sure that the grant process is one that's truly competitive and all regions of the state are going to be truly competitive. So thank you for that thoughtfulness and the ongoing work in that regard. Other questions or comments? All right, not hearing any others, we'll go on into BizOp 3, which is the approval for the federal program monitoring and support and internal audit personnel. As a quick reminder to everyone, the CARES Act money, which is money that goes into 2022. So this is much longer term money than what we talked about in our first action item today. With respect to that, there are, we had approved under the administrative portion of that, there's up to 1.9 million for administrative needs. We did not approve that much. We approved roughly $1 million, approximately $1 million, which included 2 internal auditor positions to carefully be available to audit this work. We also had approved 1.6 compliance officers. The internal audit positions are in the process of being hired now, as I understand that they will be valuable additions. But in addition to that, the determination has been made that the monitoring compliance function needs more than 1.6 persons. And so ultimately the request here is going to be that we authorize allowing sufficient funding, which is available from the 1.9 million holdback for administrative needs, that we proceed to allow for the hiring of 2 internal monitoring personnel who will report directly to the internal audit department further assist in ensuring compliance, which is very important work for us, for the department and for the board. And that's the recommendation that you're going to hear. So let me turn over to Dr. Townsend and Jeannie Rousseau to comment on this item, if you would, please.
Okay, so you have very eloquently given away half of our presentation, but I will go ahead and move through. So as Vice Chair Duncan stated, Jeannie Rousseau and myself are here today to request additional positions to assist with the oversight and monitoring of the CARES Act. Currently, I myself have permission for 1.6 monitors in federal programs. And we also have authority for 2 positions in internal audit. At this time, we would like to request 2 additional positions to be paid from the remaining administrative funds. Okay. I'd like to give you a short overview of how each of the 3 functions will operate so that there's a clear understanding of that mechanism. So in terms of federal program, we offer general administration of the grant at the LEA level. So we process grant applications and budgets. Those budgets are submitted directly to our office, and our regional program administrators are the ones that do the review for that. We also offer technical assistance to districts, and we complete programmatic monitoring. So we are looking at program outcomes within our monitoring schema. In terms of internal audit, they will engage in the audit or the oversight of all of DPI processes for the entire grant. So that would be how each of the various business owners, as we've been calling them, how they are engaging and making sure that the funds are expended appropriately and that they are providing support. So internal audit will just give that bird's eye view. How's everything going? And then last but not least, the Fiscal Monitoring and Compliance Group, which is under the leadership of Shirley McFadden, they will complete fiscal monitoring for the PSUs. So basically, the LEAs and charters, they're receiving these funds. And so they are actually looking for allowable uses. They are looking at the various PRCs, 163 all the way up to 167. They are looking at those, and they are making sure that each of the entities is actually spending those funds appropriately. And so that is how the 3 areas actually work in tandem together. And so at this point, we have about 800, we've made shifts according to budget. And so there's definitely money in the budget to absorb this request. Jeannie, is there anything that you would like to add to my statements?
You know, I thought you did a great job explaining that. And I think the thing to keep in mind is that the internal audit functions will be at the state level. Now some of them, you know, there may be some work that goes down to the subrecipient level, especially if we're talking about investigations. But what we really found a need for was monitoring, just daily, you know, regular monitoring of these subrecipients, the PSUs, and finding the resources to make that happen.
All right. Thank you for that further explanation. Well, as has been indicated, we are well under the $1.9 million administrative number at this point, even by adding these positions. That being said, there will be some additional expenses that will end up going to this. For example, travel type expenses that directly relate to the monitoring compliance, those kinds of items. Some of those will definitely still come up. So, but the second part is if we see ourselves at a place where we will be able to have some funds that we won't have to use for administration purposes. And certainly we're hopeful that that's going to be the situation and believe we can monitor the situation appropriately to get to that place. That would allow us to take a look at perhaps using funds that do not appear will be encumbered for things like Leandro or the education corps or further EC needs, or, you know, there's a long list of items that these are great. This money lasts a little longer. So I think it's important that we have this necessary additional help, that we carefully monitor this fund and then see whether or not we can effectuate appropriately an amendment that would allow us to help in some other areas that would also be appropriate for CARES Act funding. So two things for the board I think we need to watch carefully. With that background, are there questions, comments, and or thoughts?
Vice Chair Duncan, this is Olivia.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. If Dr. Townsend could help me understand, I was paying close attention, but there's so much detail in this, I kind of lost track of the detail. So in the explanation, the paragraph that refers to the PRC 164 and PRC 163 rather than 64. Are those program reporting codes just pertinent to the COVID funding?
Yes, ma'am. So 160, I would say the 163 all the way up to 170. Those are the funds that are there. So PRC 163 actually refers to the 90% that was given to us to go out. And then, of course, we have the 10% reserve. Within the 10% reserve, there are a series of business owners or initiatives. And so that's what's in this PowerPoint. Each of them is one of those. And so 164 comes out of the 10%. So 163 went to all PSUs who actually had a Title I allotment within the last school year. And so if you did that, you got a proportionate share of CARES Act based on the allotment. So that's PRC 163. PRC 164 is part of our CARES Act 10%, and it is only for charter schools. And so it was designed to make sure that charter schools were on parity. So within that, with PRC 164, we took a look at 163. This is really Alexis Schautz's brainchild. But basically looking at PRC 163, and what was done was an additional allotment was given to make sure that all charter schools had at least a $45 per pupil allotment. And so that one was pretty small. So that PRC 164 was about $2 million. PRC 165, you're going to hear about some of these a little bit later, but PRC 165, 166, those are technology related items that are funded out of the 10%. PRC 167 will be special education funds funded out of the 10%. And then you heard about PRC 168 a moment ago. That was the iCares grant.
I see. Very, very smart. I'm telling you that it's fascinating, the detail that you just provided. Would PRC 163 always be in place for Title I, or is it just for the CARES money?
It's just for the CARES money.
Okay, thank you very much. That was most helpful.
You're welcome.
In light of Dr. Oxendine's questions, it might be appropriate to go ahead and move to that report you just alluded to, Dr. Townsend, the implementation report, which is the requested update item to keep the board posted on how the 10% holdback funds are being used, which also makes reference, as you indicate, makes reference to the PRC codes, defines one of those codes, as did the NC Pro letter. But it might be worthwhile just go ahead and do it while we're on this topic, if that would be all right, Chair Davis. It's slightly out of order. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go ahead and jump in. So we are pleased to provide an update for each of the initiatives tied to the CARES Act 10% reserve. Each of the initiatives has been assigned a business owner. I'm going to ask that each business owner come forward and provide a very brief update as to what they've been up to since we first presented to you in September. We will begin with blended learning with Dr. Vanessa Wren.
Thank you, Vice Chair Duncan and Dr. Townsend. Again, the blended learning task order is for $75,000, and it is for the Department of Digital Teaching and Learning to work in partnership with the Friday Institute to develop and deliver professional learning for a second cohort based around effective blended and remote learning coaching and teaching principles. We just finished our first cohort in late November and received the feedback from that, and the feedback was very positive. And so we will be beginning our second cohort in January. The second part of this task order is to develop an online course that can be used on demand across the state, across each PSU, or by whole group, that will be developed around effective practices for blended teaching and learning, and which will lead to a level 1 micro credential as a result. And that work will begin in February of 2021.
Thank you. We should probably stop on each one since business owners will be rotating. If anyone has a question on that one, please jump in.
Vice Chair Duncan, I do have a quick question.
Please.
The $75,000 for someone would put it in revert. Thank you, Dr. Townsend Smith. So the blended learning support, $75,000, that doesn't seem like a lot of money. What does that pay for?
$30,000 of the $75,000 will pay for Friday Institute staff to conduct the second and potentially a third cohort of coaches, and they will be going through training around student engagement, parent engagement, equity practices, overcoming stumbling blocks that they have learned from remote instruction, social and emotional well-being, and how to support the adults who are supporting children in the household. The $45,000 will be to develop the online course that we will store and house inside of the state learning management system and make available to all of the PSUs across the state, that they can use on demand with teachers, or they can facilitate as a PLC, or have a facilitator at their district level.
Okay, very good. That is a fascinating idea. So helpful. I can see beginning teachers taking advantage of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Duncan.
Certainly. Unless any more questions on that, we'll go on to connectivity exploration.
This is Michael Ramsey. I'm standing in for Michael Nicolaides, who got called away. This is briefly $250,000 to explore non-traditional internet connectivity. 3 major areas we're looking at: television white space. When all the TV stations moved to digital, they freed up those frequencies. There's companies coming in. We may be able to use broadband over that. SpaceX, low Earth orbit internet satellite. We've been in conversations with them, and we're looking late December at the earliest for getting involved in that. And then LTE wireless, which fits a certain type of terrain, which is listed on there, probably more for the western part of the state. We're getting the task order finalized, and we'll be beginning work any day now.
All right, very good. Any questions on that one? Let's go on to the school transformation.
Greetings. Our full plan is on your agenda for a vote today. If approved, we will make contact with our targeted districts and schools as early as next week and start to move the formal MOA process forward. I just want to say how grateful we are for these funds, and they are providing a bridge for us to offer much needed services.
Any questions on that one? All right. I think we just covered this one, but anything else anyone wants to say?
No, I think that's fine.
Great. And let's go to funds for charter schools.
Sure. This was what I was just discussing at the request of Dr. Oxendine. And so for this particular PRC, we conducted a technical assistance webinar to help charters understand how to complete their applications. And as of the time that this presentation was due, 27 of 81 applications had been approved, and those funds have already started flowing to those entities. And I would say this process has been really good for us. We have been able to increase our level of collaboration with the Office of Charter Schools. Our assistant director has been the prime contact with the Office of Charter Schools to try to make sure that charters really understand how to really utilize their funds with CARES Act and also with other fund sources.
Very good. Questions or comments on this one? All right. Grant program for child care. This is the iCares grant that we really just talked about. So I don't know, unless anyone has a question left, we should probably just go on to digital curriculum resources.
Hi, this is Vanessa Wren again. The curriculum resources is $10.8 million available to be allocated out to our PSUs. Due to the nature of these funds, again, there must be an application. As of this morning, we have 59 applications turned in. Applications opened on November the 13th, and we had a statewide technical assistance webinar also on November the 13th. Our goal is to have these allocations out by January 2021, because we know that many school districts are looking to use these funds to purchase digital content, and also digital content that has the ability to provide a diagnostic tool on student learning gaps and potentially close some of those learning gaps. And but we will continue monitoring, and every single PSU will be contacted if they do not have their application in. But we want to try to close applications by December 11th so we can go ahead and get those funds out to the field so they can make some planning for the remainder of this school year and the upcoming school year.
Thank you. Questions or comments on that one? All right, then let's touch on external evaluation.
Okay, sure. This area is a work in progress for us. We have been in communication with our partners at Serve Center, and they have recently provided us with a scope of work as of yesterday. And so our goal for this is to really look at CARES Act overall. It's a small amount of money for the scope of what we have, but they are sure that they can at least look at a few of the metrics to allow us to understand the impact of CARES Act overall.
Will there be interim reports on that, or will that just be one report at the end of the entire CARES Act? It would be helpful to have an interim report. We
actually had asked to do it, I guess, at the close of the fiscal year. So we would expect a report of the first year, sometime September, well, more than likely October, since we're closing out in September. And then that final report would be available. I'm happy to share the current scope of work if you would like for me to, Vice Chair Duncan, and I welcome any feedback if there are specific metrics that the board might want to address.
All right, it would probably be valuable to, were you suggesting you would distribute it to us in writing, or you want to talk about it right now?
I can distribute it in writing. I just received it yesterday afternoon, so I have not had an opportunity to review it at length, but I'm happy to share that with you. It came in at 2:30 yesterday afternoon.
I don't want to put you in an unfair position trying to report on something with this guy, so maybe distribution, and if board members have questions, we can bring it up at our next meeting. How about that?
Okay, that would be great. I guess I'm anxious to receive feedback so that we can go ahead and enter into a contract. So I will get that out most expeditiously.
Very good. Instructional support reserve funding for EC students.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Duncan and members of the board. From our slide, you can see that we have completed the application. It says drafted. It has been completed now, and I believe is being entered in the grant system itself. This grant will go through the typical grant system that all of our large grants go through now within the agency. That's projected to go live by mid-December and would close around mid-January with a target of allocating out the funds in early to mid-February. This grant will be a part of our monitoring cycle with our fiscal monitoring as well. And to follow up from Dr. Martin, we are most appreciative of these funds from the state board to continue to support services for students with disabilities.
To follow up on issues that have arisen about grants, just to ask the question proactively, will there be considerations to make sure we try to have a very broad involvement or possibility of all districts around the state being able to be participants?
Yes, sir. What we did in the policy that was approved by the board was to target all districts being eligible with a planning allotment, but we also will do, I guess, a weighted allocation looking at our high needs districts, our low wealth districts, and that gives them a few extra points in the grant process. So a lot like our general IDEA dollars are distributed based on poverty rates as well as their ADM. Those will be weighted for this application as well. So our high needs districts will be considered as part of their allocate as we allocate those funds. But it will be open to all districts, and we have made a planning allotment based on all districts receiving some of this $10 million.
Thank you for that additional information. Are there other questions or comments on this important area? All right, not hearing any, let's go on to learning management platform standardization.
Hello, this is Vanessa Wren again. And this allocation is for the state learning management platform, Canvas. And the goal is to standardize the access to the learning management system for students and parents, and to be able to support sharing of content between LEAs and charter schools and between NCDPI and school districts as well. The applications opened on November the 13th. We also held a statewide technical assistance webinar on November the 13th. Our goal again is to have these allocations out in January of 2021. As of this morning, we had 27 applications turned in. And again, just as with the digital content, we will contact every single PSU in the state if they don't have their application in, because they are eligible for these funds at the existing state contracted price for Canvas to support their learning. And again, I'm going to echo what Dr. Thomas and Dr. Martin has said. We are very appreciative for these funds, as is our field. They are very appreciative and needy of these funds that are helping support what they're doing now. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments from any board member?
Yes, Vice Chair Duncan, this is Olivia. I missed something in the discussion about standardizing Canvas for schools and for families. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, one of the stumbling blocks that we've heard is that parents and students and educators we're trying to learn how to use many different systems. And so every PSU in the state, let me correct myself, every LEA in the state, with the exception of 11 LEAs, are now using Canvas. And these funds will help them sustain that use of Canvas and minimize the number of platforms that students and teachers have to learn how to use.
Right.
So that is one of the primary goals. And it also helps them as they share content. So if you have one district who has developed really great grade 3 reading content, they can easily just share that with actually a couple of clicks to another district to have access to that.
Now, I want to also, Vice Chair Duncan, if I could just continue with another follow-up. At the district level, who would be your main contact for this grant and the technical components of working with Canvas?
Each district has a Canvas point person that they've set up. Oftentimes that is the technology director or their director of digital teaching and learning. But we have also communicated this out to our chief academic officers and our finance officers as well. So there should not be gaps in knowledge that this is available. But again, back to your point, each PSU has a contact for their Canvas management.
So they would have like a help desk, maybe, I would imagine.
They have a help desk and they also have tier 1 support.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Vice Chair Duncan.
No, thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
Any other questions?
Yes, Vice Chair Duncan, this is Donna Tipton-Rogers. I have a quick question.
Right.
I'm wondering, I think you mentioned there's 11 systems that are using something different. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then is there a follow-up with those 11 to try to get them all on Canvas, or are we just letting them do what they choose?
Out of the earlier funding that we had back in August and September, we had $1.47 million available from House Bill 1043 for districts who were not currently a Canvas user to access. So those funds were made available to them. We have analyzed those 11 districts, and out of those 11, 9 of those are using a free resource, and 2 of those are using a paid-for resource. So certainly it's open to them to use Canvas, and this is open to them if they want to do that, but that is still their decision if they would like to take advantage of this funding.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Any further questions on this one? All right, then let's go on to instructional support partnership.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Angie Mullinex. Thank you so much for allowing us to update you on this. This is an extremely beneficial and important partnership, and we've mentioned it several times over the past few months, but I'm so excited to provide a very current update that our teachers are in their cohorts. We have cohorts 1, 2, and 3. Our cohort 1 teachers have worked with NCDPI staff to include those from the Office of Early Learning, Standards Curriculum and Instruction, and K-3 literacy departments. And they have written those lessons, and then they have worked through a revision process in which we also looped in the UNC Literacy Fellows. So cohort 1 now has finalized lesson plans for both literacy and math, and they are currently working with UNC TV this week to set up the studio and to begin recording. They'll actually be recording on the weekends because these teachers are doing this in addition to their regular jobs, which we know is quite extensive as it is. And then cohort 2 is in the process of writing their lessons and working with our DPI staff and UNC Literacy Fellows. So again, the recording is beginning this week and it will continue for the next couple weeks. And then it is about an 8-week processing time frame. And so those lessons are projected to begin airing on the UNC TV channel the first week of February. Additionally, as we've mentioned, we will house those lessons in our Go Open NC repository, and they will also be housed on the Digital Teaching and Learning YouTube channel. And this project here, as we go through the next couple slides, this relates to the last slide in the show, which is the teacher video lesson. So I'm just going to touch on that right now so that's done and out of the way. That is exactly what I just talked about. And those are the teachers who are actually being paid their stipends to provide those lessons. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Any questions on those two slides and the progress being made? Obviously, in all these slides, there's a lot of good work going on that's being reflected. So we're grateful for our professional development for our school leaders.
Thank you, Vice Chair Duncan, and good afternoon to you and the fellow board members. This is Rachel McBroom. I'm the business owner for this. I'm happy to share with you the updates that of what have occurred in supporting our K-12 leaders across the state. As we shared in September, we are partnering with the North Carolina Principal and Assistant Principal Association to offer a modified version of their Distinguished Leadership Program. Since September, they have launched the inaugural Distinguished Leadership and Remote Learning Cohort. That was 206 participants across the state. The map that you see on your screen indicates the geographic representation of those participants and also includes 13 charter schools as well across the state. This cohort is going through a 14-week program that consists of both facilitated asynchronous and synchronous sessions. In addition to the Distinguished Leadership and Remote Learning cohorts, webinars are being recorded to be available on demand to any leader across the state who wishes to view them. Just a few weeks ago in mid-November, the first series of webinars on coaching and evaluation were released, and additional webinars will roll out in mid-December on supporting instruction in remote and hybrid learning environments, with a follow-up in January for how to maintain and build culture in a remote hybrid learning setting. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Specifically for those districts that are not participating at all to this point, is there some ongoing reaching out efforts to bring them into the fold as having some of their personnel participate in these webinars as well?
Yes, sir, Vice Chair Duncan, there certainly is that opportunity, and we also have launched the application period for a second cohort. It is open now. Applications will be accepted through January, so we will be communicating that through our channels, and we'd also be happy to share it with specific districts if board members would like for us to do so.
We obviously love to get people from all of our districts involved in supporting professional development. So thank you for work. Any other questions or comments on this one? All right.
Dr. Townsend Smith, could you go back up one?
Oh, sorry.
Good afternoon to the board. I'm very excited to present an update on what we have been doing with the professional development for K-12 teachers funding. We have a program that we're calling TOT. That is a free professional development program designed to prepare and support educators as they work in online and remote learning environments. Our first course is called An Introduction to Online Teaching and Learning, and it's very, very surface level, surface and a little bit more, but looking at the LMS and how to move content online, student engagement, accessibility, and many other things. We have had 532 teachers to enroll in our first course. Enrollments are rolling and ongoing. We've also had many thousands of educators to attend our weekly webinars. We're working on the expansion of our offerings, and those will debut in the spring. We do a pre and post survey with our introductory course, and I did just want to briefly read one of the evaluation comments that we received from an educator after they had gone through the course, which is 20 hours, so they do get a recommendation for 2 CEUs. This person stated, "I now can say I feel comfortable, really comfortable creating modules and arranging my work online. I feel excited that I understand how to communicate via teacher talk and text online, as well as including video and audio clips. I also feel I understand more of the potential challenges we could face with students who need instruction materials presented differently. Typing out instructions and including videos for students will be easy for me now. Instructing students on how to complete discussion boards will also be very easy. So comments like this show us that it's all worthwhile and we're continuing on. I'll pause if there are questions.
Any questions or comments?
Vice Chair Duncan, I have one quick comment, and and here it is. Excellent.
Great comment. All right, any other questions or comments on this, or let's go, do we have any more slides?
We've done that one.
Yeah. All right, we got it. So we intend to keep bringing reports about how these monies are being expended every couple of months so that the board can continue to have a good understanding. I hope you find this to be helpful and informative in terms of the work that's being done with these funds. We'll continue to provide you update reports. So that brings us then back to the legislative and budget priorities item. And Catherine Johnson, Freeburg McKinney are both available and here to start us on that. But I hope everyone took to heart the homework assignment from yesterday, because after that, what we'd like to do is to get everybody's top items as priorities in their mind so we can start to formulate a list of what commonalities seem to exist among board members as to what are very, very high priority items. So, Catherine, let me call on you first.
Thank you. And good afternoon, Chairman Davis and Vice Chair Duncan and state board members. Thank you for the opportunity to be before you again on our budget requests for the upcoming long session. As we discussed with you last month, these requests will go to the Office of State Budget and Management and the Governor's Office for their review and possible inclusion in the Governor's budget, which then goes to the General Assembly. Next slide, please. As we work toward improving education for all children in North Carolina, we know there are many, many areas that still need money. But with that, the guidance from OSBM this year encourages all agencies to focus on the 4 priority areas, one of which is making North Carolina a top 10 educated state. And within that context, OSBM suggests that we prioritize our budget requests to focus specifically on delivering critical services, identifying opportunities for efficiencies and savings, and ensuring that our expansion requests have a clear link to our strategic plan and have strong justifications. Slide. So the purpose of today's discussion is to do just that, is to help to prioritize the many requests that we have within the context of the board's strategic plan and the legislative focus areas. This slide and the next slide are just refreshers of those 2 for DPI. As you've seen before, these are the legislative focus areas for the board. And so we want to continue to tie those requests very clearly to both of these. And knowing that all the requests are very important, we also do want to recognize that the amount on our current list, which is over $500 million in new requests, is likely greater than the amount that we will potentially receive. This is especially true this year, given the uncertainty of our revenue situations due to this pandemic. So our challenge today is to try to reach consensus on the most important items the board would like for funding. And I will turn it over to Mr. McKinney, who will help walk through our requests by these legislative focus areas.
Good afternoon, Chair Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, Superintendent Johnson, board members and advisors, DPI staff and colleagues, and all of our partners listening across the state. Dr. Johnson, I would ask, as we move into this discussion, to take several things into account. This process will take time, and today represents the first step in that process leading to our January meeting and the finalization of our submission to the General Assembly. A quick reminder, we have removed any previous numbers or tiers so that we can start with a clean slate in our discussion. And to begin, we'd like to highlight a few underlying ideas that may assist us individually and collectively in the discussion process. We ask that we reflect on what each of you believe best reflects the strategic plan, the action framework, and the equity resolution, as well as taking into account a 2-year budget strategy with Leandro considerations, state revenue projections, and potential COVID recovery and transition strategies. We also ask that you think about how our legislative area focuses and the associated requests may create funding buckets with overlapping priorities. Also, please consider requests and allocations that have been made in regard to the various COVID-19 relief funding, whether that be CRF, the ESSER, the CARES Act, which was just incredibly explained to us, and these that have set up initiatives and may require support in the future as we answer statewide needs and challenges moving forward. As Vice Chair Duncan mentioned yesterday, if we can elevate what we find most critical as solutions as we engage in an asset-based philosophy rather than necessarily a deficit focus, which would be kind of checking off specific requests. This may also require comparing requests to one another in relation to what ultimately serves our students and eliminates opportunity gaps within multiple sectors. And then lastly, we did want to bring up the fact that there are multiple requests that do not have a dollar amount. And these are potential budget requests that align with the state board's state board's action framework and could be considered a high priority and would need further illustration with a dollar amount. So with that, we would love to open the floor for discussion and have you just begin to prioritize what you see in these legislative areas.
So the floor is open, and there's a special award given to the brave soul who goes first. But we really would like genuinely to get input from everybody to narrow this. We're not going to be in a position to make any kind of final decision today, but the thoughts that you share with us today will help us move towards getting to a final decision as we go through work in January for getting the budget to OSMB either in January or early February, depending on the time. So let me I'll go ahead and open the floor and see if we can generate time. And my real thought really is if you've got 5 things that you think are just extremely important based on the work that you've done and what you've observed and listened to, that would be a big help and a great starting point. I suspect we'll find commonality.
Chair Duncan.
Yes.
Wendell.
Award winner. Wendell, go ahead.
I don't want an award for this, but anyway, and looking at the whole child social emotional student mental health budget lines.
Yes, sir.
And I don't know how you want to do it, but there are other categories under that topic, like the student mental health plan.
It's our biggest overall category with $208 million. So yeah, there are a number of categories under. Do you want to focus on specific ones would be helpful?
Mm-hmm. But I want to focus on the mental health plan.
Yes, sir.
Along with the exceptional children funding.
Yes, sir.
That's found there. And the support positions. Coming out of this COVID era, I think we're going to have to look at that mental health plan, especially with what we heard yesterday.
So looking at the total of those items, you would push for, just to pick a dollar amount, $139 million in additional support.
That sounds like a plan. Yes, sir.
Motion. And would that be, do you have any other priorities that would be important for you in addition to those three? That you would put at the top of your list? It goes without saying, all these priorities are important to everybody.
Correct, but principal and teacher pay.
All right. That gets you to 5.
Yeah, but I'll stop right there for right now, but I got another list.
All right, well, go ahead and give let's go to 6. If you got 6 and 7, let's go ahead and hear them.
We're the teacher fellow scholarships.
Okay, that's 6.
And along with the funds for troops to teachers.
Okay.
Let me stop there for right now.
Very good. All right, your top 5 score the most points, but we appreciate 6 and 7. They're valuable. And anybody else is encouraged to do the same. All right, and who would like to?
Wait a minute. Could I add one more, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, here comes A.
The science of reading training.
Very good.
K3 literacy.
Yes.
That's the other one. Okay.
Could I ask a follow-up question, sir? In the alternative pathway for teacher recruitment models, and you mentioned the troops to teachers, would you be in support and looking at a kind of a bucket to support district models underwriting this cost of teacher preparation in support of alternative pathways, or is it a specific budget request that would be for troops to teachers?
No, it's the bucket. It's the bucket.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
And hopefully within that would be the drive. I saw one that drive didn't have any allotted numbers to it.
Yes, sir. Right here.
Whether that was coming out of our design task force, would come out of here, or would it come out in the governor's office? But that's going to be important once we hear the nuts and bolts of that report.
And that's a great distinction. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, and I should say to everyone, you're not bound by these comments. As we coalesce into coming up with lists, you can further change and or adapt or modify your thoughts. But this is a great start. Thank you, Adele. Who'd like to go next?
Vice Chair Duncan, this is Jill Kamnitz.
Yes, Ms. Kamnitz, please.
I sort of have a broad statement to make, and I'm not sure where to go with it. But it seems to me that we've talked about being guided by the strategic plan and the equity plan, but it seems to me for the next year at least, possibly the 2 years, recovery of learning losses is going to be what we're having to concentrate on. And I think the social emotional learning and the mental health that Mr. Hall just talked about goes into that. But just looking through all these priorities, the ones that strike me as just critically important are the ones that are going to directly contribute to the learning losses that we anticipate we are going to see in our students. So I'm looking at district support and school turnaround, early literacy, and I'm not sure what else fits into that category, but I think in our minds that ought to be part of the discussion and part of our prioritization.
Yeah, science of reading's been mentioned already. Would you fit that as part of that? One of those
yes.
items?
Yes.
All right. Well, as you review the list as we go on, Ms. Candace, would you just feel free to jump in with additional ones as you review the list you think meet that category. All right, who would like to share some thoughts, some further thoughts? Yeah.
And I wanted to just real quickly follow up on what Ms. Kamnitz just mentioned about, as we earlier stated, there are programs and initiatives that the CRF, or in this case, the CARES Act, are helping us stand up, which include the district and regional support But then in a 2-year budget cycle, we would need to continue supporting that. So I'm very glad that you brought that up, and we've marked that down as a higher priority. So thank you.
And thank you for putting the focus on strategic plan and turnaround. All right, who else? Floor is open.
Would anyone like to lift up ones that have already been mentioned again so that we can raise those up as even further priorities? Is there almost in a way that we second the motion?
This is Donna Tipton Rogers. I'll just kind of second what Ms. Camnett spoke about, the recovery of learning losses. That's crucial, and everything that goes with that, I feel, is something that we need to focus on, whether it be the mental health area, of course, the district turnaround, early literacy, support funds. I think all of that ties together with the learning losses that we'll have to face.
I agree.
This is Olivia. I don't know how to go about making this request because this is a difficult conversation for me. Going back through the previous presentation on the CARES money and how it's distributed across those PRCs and each business owner who did such a fine job presenting the focus of their funding. I just wonder, one part of that presentation stands out in my mind. It had to do with a year subscription, and I think it was for digital online resources. So I'm just wondering if some of that, I don't know how long this CARES money is going to be out there, the longevity of it. I have no idea. But I wonder if we don't need to look at those categories and think about funding some of those categories that may not be with us forever.
I think you're right. We should. On that one, it goes 2 years out to September of 2022. One of the concerns specifically on subscriptions, we should just note that the General Assembly long-term has shown a reluctance to fund subscriptions. So that's something that we're very grateful for the coronavirus funds because that subscriptions are desperately needed in this time. It's not, it will be a difficult sell historically, at least in the General Assembly.
So I guess I'm talking about this is, yeah, I'm sorry.
Again, a lot of people who are nodding in agreement, people who know more than I do, that's the
I would just hate to, have good things going on as a result of this funding and then it come to some abrupt halt. So if there's some way we can sustain that through the normal budgetary process would be advantageous.
Agree with your thought. You may have to work through the normal budgetary process in some redirection.
Thank you.
Olivia, Dr. Oxenide, do you have other areas of thought?
Well, I will always want millions to go into the reading, the science of reading. So I'll ditto that every time I have a chance to ditto.
Right. Anything on turnaround schools or those kinds of issues that have been lifted up already? I know you've been involved in that a lot as well.
Very much so. I would certainly underscore that as a need, and I want us to also think about the Jill's comment about and Donna's the learning loss that's going to be epic. Actually, we can't overlook like math support, mathematics, whether it be professional development. Remediation after school, whatever is needed.
To the point, some preliminary research out there against math loss is greater than reading loss.
Oh, I would imagine, I would suspect so.
Yeah, thank you for looking that up.
Thank you.
All right, others.
This is Mr. Ford.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I guess I would ask sort of to dovetail from Ms. Kamens's comments about the recovery during, fall loss, right? Some sort of evaluation of the effectiveness of those efforts, was that a consideration sort of in the monetary ask, so that we can be as precise as possible? And we ran into this, problem with reading in the past, was that we discovered that a lot of folk, we didn't really know how to teach reading, right? So as we think about remediation efforts, is there something we can do, monitor our progress to our goals to make sure that what we're doing is in fact effective, and is that built into the funding request?
Well, that's a really good thought. So I'm not sure we even have it listed right now, but that's a very good thought. So we'll put that down as one of your priority thoughts. Good. Particularly coming out of, you had the pleasure of being at the JLOC meeting the other day. Those are those fit along the lines of the questions that were asked. So it's a very good thought.
Can I add on to what Mr. Ford just said? This is Ms. Kamitz again, and I'm sorry to beat a dead horse, but I'm just wondering whether there are some things that aren't in this list right now that we are going to find are very important over the next couple of years. And I'm thinking about things like extended learning time after school. And I don't know if that fits in anywhere in any of anything that we've already got down on these priorities, but are there things like that we don't normally think about doing, but that are going to be important?
Well, and the question is it extended learning time or is it extended days in school?
Well, perhaps both of them. I know that's more than just money. That's also a different kind of legislative
right. It is
ask, but it does cost money to do that.
It does. Well, and to Vice Chair Duncan's point, like, I think this is a great opportunity. If it is not on this list right now, then this is our opportunity to say we need to have a budget item that works with transition and recovery for COVID in a way that we may not have a specific identification right now, but we need to make sure that that's included in our overall budget request, particularly the expanded budget. And so we will take notes and then and add some of these ideas, whether it's an evaluation of learning, whether or not it's a bucket for in the same effect of what we were trying to do in the bridge of the summer and the learning loss that may have occurred there from March to build something out in a request. So very important. And as Vice Chair Duncan commented, these were ideas that were also brought up in JLOC and a longer term recovery strategy idea. Thank you.
All right, additional thoughts. I know some folks haven't said anything yet. We certainly want you to be able to give us some of your insights. These have been really helpful.
And I wanted to lift back up something that Mr. Hall commented on with drive recommendations, but then also again, any type of grow your own and merging those two buckets and see if there's any support there, knowing this is not only a strategic plan item for the board, but also a Leandro bucket item, which is teacher preparation and professional learning opportunities. So is there any further support in that regard so that we can lift that up as well?
Any thoughts on that?
Freebird, would you give a little bit more detail around that, your idea?
Yes, I'm going to put it up on give me 1 second. So one of the ideas that Mr. Hall had mentioned earlier was troops to teachers. So there is a funding request there to build out different models for alternative pathway teacher recruitment models. That could be the grow your own troops to teachers, TA to teachers, teacher cadet program, but then also in synthesis with diversifying the workforce and the recommendations that will be coming from Drive Task Force, as was discussed yesterday, to increase recruitment and retention and widen the pipeline of educators of color in North Carolina. A strategic priority here that would do that would kind of synthesize those two together in teacher recruitment and retention.
Okay, that's something I would support.
I would agree with that as well. We've got to expand our teaching force quickly.
Thank you.
I agree as well.
And Freebird, this is Maureen. I definitely agree with that as well. Being someone that actually came through the Troops to Teachers program as my pathway into the classroom, I think that those alternative programs to help us grow teachers in our state are critical. And I think that we need to ensure the funding is there so that we can continue those programs.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And we really appreciate your story and again, your willingness to share that. I feel like as we've visited districts across the state over the last few months, this has been a challenge, but also in many areas, a real bright spot in their innovative and resourceful way of recruiting and retaining teachers. So the more that we can amplify those examples and provide resources and support across the state where those needs aren't necessarily being met, I think could be huge moving forward in closing that chasm.
Freebirds, Bev, I would also add if there's a way to integrate into that section continued or increased support for advanced teaching roles. And I know some of the new work coming out from the roundtable sort of incorporates that into this development and licensure process. And I think that's the beauty of it. But it's clearly a retention strategy. And I just don't see that separate from what you're talking about here, but would be a different funding stream.
Yeah, one of the Drive Task Force recommendations also is that. Yeah, I think it comes several different ways.
Oh, and backing up to the previous slide, I think that again, intertwined with all of that is increasing the support for expand the new teacher support program.
All right, we're getting close to the end of our time. And I don't want to go unduly long, although I think this is terribly important. This discussion has been very helpful, extremely helpful. Those who haven't had a chance to say anything yet, please chime in, whether it just be one point of focus or several, please let us know.
And as mentioned at the earlier part of the conversation, this is a multi-step process. So the more you take the time to kind of look over this and review the items, if I can provide any more specific feedback on what some of these might be requesting, what Dr. Johnson and I are going to do is take what you've discussed today, put them into funding buckets so that we can align them back to the strategic plan of legislative focus areas. But again, I would welcome any individual conversations or any time that we want to pull a few people together to talk about any of these specifically moving forward. We'll do our best to pull all of these conversations together and provide another more inclusive document to review at the January board meeting.
just to summarize so far, without necessarily being able to encompass everything, I've heard support for enhancing the teacher pipeline. I've heard support a little more indirectly for enhancing the principal pipeline. Definitely heard a lot of support for social, emotional health and welfare of our students, and heard a lot of support for things that go towards the remediation, as someone, or epic remediation effort that we have before, which includes science of reading, includes turnaround school support, includes obviously the social emotional component is part of that. So all those many subparts that go with that, and also align with our strategic plan, and also many of these things are going to align with our landlord responsibilities as well. So. One thing I haven't heard, there's probably two things I haven't heard anything about, so just learn about it very quickly. Post-secondary career workforce has been an important emphasis of the board. I know our chair participates as a member of the My Future NC board. That's an important initiative for the state. And I realize what's happening is it's getting lost a little bit in the frenzy of the pandemic. But interested in any comments about that? And the last one I'll say is the department has listed up a few places where there are positional needs potentially within the department. And so I also list that up for any comment that there might be. Because there's been some points expressed about that, so we need to be cognizant of. Any comments on those two items that we hadn't heard much discussion about?
This is Donna Tipton Rogers, and I would just like to say I think through everything that we are planning and talking about, we do need to keep in mind My Future NC, the initiative that is statewide, and of course the training and post-secondary training that goes along with that.
Thought we could count on you for that. That is your work's life, your life's work. I mean, so thank you.
I almost started with that, but I decided against it.
If ever there's an eloquent voice on it, you live it every day. So thank you.
Thank you.
And the thoughts and comments.
Mr. Duncan, just to respond to that, if we could pull the slide that focuses on career. If we could.
Yeah, working on it. And that was the royal way.
Whoever got the power in this meeting.
Dr. Townsend Smith always has the power.
So a very large budget item there is credentials and certifications for students. That seems to me to have quite a huge value. But I don't know.
And support the legislature, I think, to be there. I've heard a number of legislators comment about that being important. So, all right, so that's glad we looked that up and got those comments. Any other comments on that one? All right, well, we've got a good starting list. We're going to give you a bigger homework assignment to start narrowing further after we pull all this information together and send it out to you. So, and we're going to, start to have to move to some more fine points in January. So, please keep your mind going on this. Really good thoughts came out in this discussion. I want to thank everybody for it. Our last two, just to close up BizOp committee meeting, I'll put the last four items together. On the monthly budget report, the agency vacancy report, the executed contracts report, and the planned contracts report. I have not heard any questions from anyone this month. If anyone has any questions, please speak up now, or and please ask them. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and complete our BizOp committee report. Not hearing any, Chair Davis, turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Duncan, and the entire team for that terrific work. And the discussion about our budget priorities is a great lead in to an update on the North Carolina Education Corps. We continue to make great progress in this initiative. Many districts have joined, and we've received a tremendous amount of response from the recruiting efforts underway. There are hundreds of spirited North Carolinians who would like to join this effort. At this time, I'll turn to former State Superintendent Dr. Mike Ward and Mr. John Paul Smith, American Ripples, to provide us an update on the North Carolina Education Corps.
Good afternoon, board members. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Board members, a lot has happened over the course of the past few weeks. We reported last month the approval of the first cohort of North Carolina Education Corps districts. Since then, additional districts have come forward to express interest in being Education Corps districts. And since our November report to you, we've recruited applicants who are eager to get out and do the work of Education Corps to serve their state, to serve their communities, to serve children. As Chair Davis pointed out, hundreds of individuals have responded. We've been actively seeking foundation support for the central activities of Education Corps. Those central activities, the state level activities, include recruitment and basic training of Corps members, project management, and district support. I want to turn to John Paul Smith, who's the project director for Education Corps. And John Paul, if you will, provide some details around that skeleton that I just crafted. Tell us about the progress so far.
Sure thing. Thank you, Dr. Ward. So in terms of the inaugural cohort of districts, we have 18 districts that we're working with. It's 8 districts from Tier 1 counties, 8 districts from Tier 2 counties, and 2 districts from Tier 3 counties. And that also includes 3 of the Leandro districts, with Cumberland, Halifax, and Vance being a part of this. So we launched the North Carolina Education Corps in early October. And the following 6 weeks, we got the inaugural cohort of districts. And in the last 4 weeks, we've been recruiting Corps members themselves. We've gotten over 1,100 applications through different job sites and online platforms. We have over 500 official applications, and the inaugural cohort of districts are looking to hire about 200 Corps members. So we're well over that mark. We are recruiting Corps members to serve as tutors to help with that recovery of the learning loss, as Ms. Kamnitz was speaking to, as well as to address student disengagement. We're recruiting Corps members to serve as counselors' aides, as digital navigators, and also as contact tracers, in addition to serving as more generally as volunteer coordinators to help draw in additional resources for mentors, contact tracers, and social and emotional supports to help students this year. Within the group of applicants, we have we put a group of reviewers to review the initial 400 applications that we got by November 22nd. That team of reviewers looked at the 400 applications over Thanksgiving break. They did a phenomenal job. Their review yielded over 210 absolutely yes, put these folks to work candidates for the inaugural cohort. Of that group, over 120 of the applicants have master's degrees or doctorates, highly qualified. The review team also prioritized hiring or preferencing Corps member candidates from the local communities in the areas that the districts are serving. So this kind of flows in with the Grow Your Own strategy, and it just kind of builds on the type of work that the program Troops to Teachers is working on as well. And then the reviewers also preferenced candidates who have the racial or ethnic diversity background that a lot of the students do in the inaugural cohort of districts. So we have a lot of activity and are really excited by the energy that we've gotten and interest we've gotten from North Carolinians across the state to serve the inaugural cohort. We are currently matching the top candidates that we have with the districts, and we'll be providing the first batch of applications and roster of candidates to the districts this week. We also have a final deadline of December 7th to receive more applications. We've already received over 100 more applications that we'll be processing in a second batch to the districts before the end of the year. And then the core members will be ready to go in January for the districts themselves. In addition to that, we've also gotten great media coverage for the North Carolina Education Corps program. We've the NNO, the Winston-Salem Journal, as well as WRAL have done coverage of North Carolina Education Corps. So we're really picking up steam and visibility, and this is going to help provide those additional student supports that we've been talking about ASAP. Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about next steps?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll close out briefly. Yeah, board members, the next steps include fundraising to support those central activities that I outlined for you a few moments ago. And this is an important activity. You approved the use of GEAR funds for districts to use in paying the stipend of Education Corps members. But we've also got to make sure that funds are adequate to support those central activities of Education Corps that I outlined a while ago. And so fundraising for that purpose is important. We're in contact with foundation representatives, and we're ready to start receiving individual and organizational donations. We've got the same two repositories that we used for FastNC. Those repositories are ready for donations. And so I'll encourage you, board members, to please send folks our way, folks who are ready to invest in a very worthy cause. Other next steps are things that relate to what John Paul's already laid out for you. Training and deployment of core members is a big focus right now. And the recruitment of a bipartisan steering committee for the long haul is also important. We've got a great launch team that's been working hard on this for the past few months, and we'll be looking to recruit a long-term bipartisan steering committee for Education Corps. The Corps is poised to make a big difference in the lives of students who need their support, and we thank you for creating this opportunity to do something big, something profound on their behalf. We're available for your questions, board members.
Questions from my colleagues on the North Carolina Education Corps? Well, Dr. Ward and John Paul Smith, and to the other volunteers that are working side by side with you, thank you for taking what just a few weeks ago was just an idea and have now turned it into a reality that'll begin impacting our students as soon as January of the new year. And confident that this will become not only a significant part of our education recovery from COVID, but will also be an enduring support to our students and teachers for many years to come. So we're grateful to you for your work. We'll be looking for those who would like to commit their funds and energy to this effort and send them your way. Thank you so much. Board members, this concludes our action items for today, our agenda items for today, other than approving our consent, action, and action on first read items. So thorough discussion and report provided on each item, including any respective consent items. And I remind colleagues that any item on the consent agenda is primarily not complex and may have come to the board for discussion in the prior month. I note also that board members have seen consent agenda items for at least a week. So at this time, I ask if there's a request to remove any item from consent, action, or action on first read agenda. Mr. Duncan.
Chair Davis, I'm not I'm not going to ask to remove the ICS too, but I have reservations about it. That's the Doral Academy request to move it more than 5 miles, and yet there's no additional input received since it's about 10 miles away in a different location. I'm going to go ahead and vote for it, but I would ask that the board undertake a review as a policy matter as to whether or not there should be some input requests are required to remove that distance away, and in general that we continue to have as part of our evaluation what impact the location of a charter school may have to the community. And I understand that's not in the statute anymore, but I think it's still a valid consideration that we have an understanding about, and to give community members a chance to comment should they so only.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. We will refer that item to the EICS committee, which handles that part of our work.
Thank you.
So hearing no other requests to remove items from the agenda, I request a motion to approve the following: the November 4th and 5th and 12th, 2020 meeting minutes, and EICS 1 and 2, 6 through 10, Turn 1 through 2, SLA 1 and 3 through 5, ES&P 1 through 3, BizOp 1 through 3, and the following 4 items from our closed session of yesterday evening. The first deals with the state board's oversight responsibility for the Innovative School District, and the item is to approve the reopening or the reentry plan of Southside Asheville Elementary School, one school in the ISD. This reentry plan is in alignment with the plan in the public schools of Robinson County, which the school resides in that geographic area, and the reentry plan would begin on January 7th. Item number 2 concerns our responsibilities to authorize the use of state funds to pay the salary of the interim superintendent in the public schools of Robinson County, which will begin upon the start date of interim superintendent DeFreeze in the amount of $6,490 per month. Item number 3 concerns the approval of the recommendations for licensure presented by staff in our closed session. And 4 is to approve the hiring of a physical education teacher for the Eastern School for the Deaf. Is there a motion to that effect? Motion by Vice Chair Duncan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hall. Any discussion on this motion before we vote? Dr. Townsend Smith, we call the roll to capture the vote.
Yes, sir. Dr. Oxendine?
Yes.
Ms. Kimmons?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Mr. Keenan? Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Vice Chair Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Chair Davis?
Motion carries. My thanks to our staff and presenters at this December 3rd, 2020 meeting, and to my colleagues. Thank you for your work before and during this meeting. I wish you all a safe, restful, and enjoyable holiday season. As you celebrate, please remember to practice together. I look forward to reconvening with you in the new year as we begin another year serving students in North Carolina. I now ask for a motion to adjourn this December 3rd, 2020 meeting. Motion by Vice Chair Duncan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Wendell.
Second by Ms. Chemnitz. Dr. Townsend Smith.
Yes, sir. Dr. Oxendine,
Yes.
Ms. Chemnitz,
Yes.
Mr. Keenan, Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ford,
Yes.
Vice Chair Duncan,
Yes.
Chair Davis.
Yes. Motion carries. We stand adjourned.
Merry Christmas to all.
That's hard to believe.